Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. I can't hear what you're saying. It's coming out muffled. Okay, so yesterday we were learning about people who were named by God. And we also, and we got onto that discussion because we were talking about people whose names were changed in Tanakh. There are some people whose names were changed and you're not allowed to make reference back to their original name. And there are some people like Yaakov Avinu, whose name was changed to Yisrael, but he is still known both as Yaakov and Yisrael because there is a lesson because the name of Yaakov represents Bnei Yisrael. And there are two aspects of the Jewish people. There's the Yaakov aspect and the Israel aspect. Now, I remember we had said it's not apparent how this discussion of changing names is in any way related to our conversation about reciting Kriya Shema. What is the connection? So let's go back. Now we're going to see the connection because remember, what was the machlokes between Ben Zoma and the Chachamim? Can anyone remember what that machlokes in the Mishnah was that we recite in the Haggadah?
Versus Mashiach.
Yes. What do we recall Yetzias Mitzrayim at night? And Ben Zoma says, Lo zachisi, I didn't have any merit in understanding what the source text for mentioning Yetzias Mitzrayim at night, Ad Shadrasha.
Yom and Lila.
1 second. So who is it that said Los? Oh, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said Los Achisi Ad Shadrasha ben Zoma, until Ben Zoma came along and expounded upon it and said Kol Yemei Chayecha. The word Kol means all the days of your life. So the Chachamim respond, no, that doesn't mean that you remember Yetzias Mitzrayim at night, but rather it means that you remember Yetzias Mitzrayim even in the Messianic age. And so it appears that Ben Zoma is of the opinion that you're not going to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim in the Messianic age. When there's this idea of remembering a new era, do you go back to the old era? When you experience a new era, do you recall the old era? When you call Yaakov Yisrael, do you recall his old name? Now we're going to see the connection. So let's take a look. Ben Zoma Omer. Ben Zoma says, and this is where are we up to? Let's see. It's right in the middle of the page on Yud Zayin Amud Beis. Ben Zoma Omer, Asidin Hein Yisrael Shelo Lahaskir Yitzias Mitzrayim La'asid Lava. Ben Zoma is quoted in the Brisa as saying that we will not make mention of Yitzias Mitzrayim in the future world, in the Messianic age. Umatam, why is that? Because of a passage in Yirmiyah chapter 23. Lachein hine yamim ba'im nu'um Hashem. Days are coming, says God. V'lo yomru od chai Hashem asher ha'ela es b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. And people will no longer say, by the life of God who took Israel out of Egypt, Ki im chai Hashem asher ha'ela v'asher hevi ezera beis Yisrael me'eretz tzafona. But rather by the life of Hashem who elevated and brought the seed of Israel from the northern land, meaning Canada. Of course, that's the northern land. Hashem took us out of the northern lands, right? But of course, it's probably referring to Babylonia, but really anywhere in the diaspora. Yeah, there you go. Okay, and so Amrulo. So what did the Chachamim respond? Because Ben Zoma is quoting an actual pasuk in the Navi to prove his point. It seems to be quite explicit in Sefer Yirmiyah that we're not going to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim anymore. We're not going to say by the life of God who took us out of Egypt, but we'll say by the life of God who redeemed us from our diaspora. So Amru lo sheyeh akir yitzias Mitzrayim, ela Mitzrayim musaf al hamalchios. Hamalchios ikr uMitzrayim tefela. So the Chachamim's response is, that doesn't mean that we're not going to remember it all. We're not going to recall it all that God took us out of Egypt, but rather the idea of the exodus of Egypt will be ancillary, will be secondary to the fact that God redeemed us from other subjugating kingdoms. That will be the main story, and Mitzrayim will be the secondary story. And the Gemara is going to give a mashal, but first, before they give the mashal, they're going to express it as this is the connection to the story of Yaakov and Yisrael. V'chein lo yikarei shimcha od Yaakov ki im Yisrael yihiyeh shemecha. That's just like when God said to Yaakov, your name is not going to be Yaakov anymore, but it's going to be Yisrael. Lo she'yakir shem Yaakov, ela Yaakov musaf al Yisrael, Yisrael ikar v'Yaakov tafel. It doesn't mean that Yaakov is completely forgotten, the name, but rather your main name will be Yisrael, and Yaakov is ancillary to the name Yisrael. Yisrael is ikar, and Yaakov is secondary. Now, B'cheinu Omer, and so too does it say regarding the days of the Mashiach in the book of Yeshaya, Al tizkeru rishonos elu hamitzriyim. You will not remember anymore the first days. That makes reference to the Egyptian bondage and exodus. The kadmonios al tisbonanu, and the early days you will not contemplate. Elu hamalchios. That verse refers to are leaving other subjugating kingdoms in our past history, like Bavel and Media Persia and Greece and so forth. Hineni oseh chadasha ata titzmach, but now I will make something new and it'll sprout forth now. Zo shel Gog. That refers to the war of Gog and Magog, which is going to be the final war and representative of the final redemption. Meaning there too, it doesn't mean to suggest that those earlier stories will be forgotten, but rather it just means that when you encounter something even more monumental than previously, you'll focus on the more monumental event, but you still won't forget the smaller event. I remember years ago, I had a Haggadah that tried to express a mashal, and we're going to see an example of this mashal right now from the Gemara is going to provide a mashal. But the mashal that I once saw is that a guy well, you know what? Let's take a look at the mashal of the Gemara, and then that'll be sufficient. Mashlu mashal l'maha davar domeh. So they gave an analogy. You know what this is like? Le'echad shahaya mahalech baderech upaga bo zei v'nitzal mimenu. It's a guy who was on the road, and all of a sudden, this wolf comes out to greet him. Scary. A wolf was a pretty scary animal, right?
It still is.
Still is. They have them out up here in the north, right? So he's called Misaper Maseh Hazev. He's saved from the wolf, and he tells everybody, "Oh my gosh, you know what I just saw in my front door? A wolf came to my door. The Thorn Hill. The wolves are here." But then later, he has an encounter with a lion. Okay, v'nitzal miyado, and he's saved by the lion miraculously. Shachach maseh hazeh v'hitzchol misaper maseh ha'ari. So he's able to forget the story of the wolf. We don't mean totally forget, but he's like, his main focus is, you're not going to believe what. First there was a wolf, but then this lion came along, right? Okay, and I was miraculously saved by the lion. V'achar kach pagabo nachash, but then later on, he was involved with a cobra, okay? V'nitzal miyado, and he was miraculously saved. And by the way, being attacked by a snake is the most dangerous of all, even more dangerous than being approached by a lion, because a lion will not eat you if it's not hungry. He will not attack you if it's not hungry. The snake is just a malicious animal. Okay? Benitzal miyado, and he gets saved by from the snake. Shachach maseh shnehem v'hischel l'saper maseh hanachash. So he forgets the first two. He forgets the wolf and the lion, and is just fixated on the cobra. Kacha Yisrael hatzaros achronos mishakchos esarbishos. Similarly, the later travails, the later history of the Jewish people that is fraught with incredibly tough times, but also miracles, overshadows. That's what it really means, mishakos. It doesn't mean it makes it totally forgotten, but it overshadows the earlier events. But the point being is that had we not left Egypt, we would not have come to the point where we are today. So that was the mashal that I read in the Haggadah. When a person, is saved from a small travail, he has to appreciate that were it not from the fact that I was saved from the wolf, I would never have encountered the lion. And if I had never encountered the lion and had been saved by it, I would have never encountered the snake and experienced that miracle. So I recognize that everything is interlinked in Jewish history, and Yetzias Mitzrayim was linked to all future iterations of exile, which ultimately links us to modern times. The fact that we have a modern state of Israel today, and we had the War of Independence, and we had the 6-Day War of 67, and we had the Yom Kippur War of 72, and now we've had the October 7th War, and all of these things have progressed to the point where the shekel is the strongest currency in the world today, literally the strongest currency in the world today, to the point where they're trying to inflate the shekel by just pumping shekels into the market, because it's harming the average Israeli, that the shekel is so strong. That we have become the dominant power in the world. We've become a superpower in the world, which is not something that we've aspired towards. But the fact is that the world recognizes that you don't mess with Israel. So this never would have happened had we not left Egypt. It never would have happened had we not gone through all of the diasporic iterations. It never would have happened without a Shoah, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what it means that in the Messianic age, we'll still make mention of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Hadron alach me'emasai. We'll come back to you, and that concludes our study of the first parak of Berachos Yerushalmi. Woohoo! Give yourselves a pat on the back. Yeah, you think he's a little accident prone, huh?
Either that or a lottery ticket, because it sounds like he's a lucky guy.
I was just watching, I was on the elliptical yesterday, and I was watching this movie called This Is Spinal Tap. Have you ever seen that? It's a classic film. And the running joke is that every 2 years their drummer dies from our drummer just died under unusual circumstances. And that's like the running joke. It's a mockumentary. Okay. But in any event, yes, so it's like you got the first drummer got attacked by a wolf. The next one just exploded on stage, just spontaneously combusted, and all right, anyway. The Perek Zeh, okay, so in this chapter, our Mishnah is going to continue a discussion of Kriya Shema, and the Mishnah is going to discuss the obligation of having proper kavana and proper reverence for the words, such that you're not going to be able to interrupt what you're doing in order to attend to anything else. Okay, so let's take a look at the Mishnah. Hayakare b'Torah v'higiya zman hamikra. If you're in the middle of Torah study, and all of a sudden the time of Kriya Shema has arrived, And what the Mishnah is making reference to is that let's say you're in the middle of Sefer Devarim, and it just so happens that the portion that you're up to is Shema in Parshas Va'eschanan, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So, and you're in the middle of being Maver Sedra, you're going over the Parsha, and hey, I got to Shema, I haven't yet recited the Shema. So, Im Kivein Libo Yatza, the Im Lav Lo Yatza. So, if you had in mind that through your recital of these psukim, you would fulfill your obligation of Shema, your mitzvah of reciting Shema uvekumecha, ubishoch becha vekumecha, when you go to sleep and when you rise. So then you're yod say the mitzvah. But if you don't have kavana, let's say after you read it, you say to yourself, "Hey, I just read Shema. Maybe I can use that to be yotze." No, but you didn't have kavana at the time, so that doesn't work. Yeah, Marv.
You also get schar for Limud Torah too?
Yeah, well, you get schar for Talmud Torah because you're learning Torah. That's the endeavor that you're engaged in. But are you asking like when you recite the Shema?
Yeah, can you get double credit?
Do you get double credit?
Yeah.
So if you remember what we had learned previously, a person could be Yotze Birkas HaTorah by saying Ahava Rabbah, right? And so the Gemara had said, but you have to study Torah right afterwards. So the question was, why do I have to study Torah right afterwards? Why can't I just use the Kriya Shema as Torah study? So one answer could be is because you have to also have Torah Sheba'al Peh. You didn't have Torah Sheba'al Peh, you only had Torah Shebichtav. But it could also be because the Shema that you're reciting is primarily for the mitzvah of Kriya Shema and not for the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. So, but I don't think it means that you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah of Talmud Torah at all. It just means that in order to properly append Talmud Torah to the Birkas Torah, the primary objective should be for Torah study. So in any event, so that's the first halacha of the Mishnah. And then uva prakim shol mipnei hakavod umeishiv. Now, here the Mishnah is going to talk about a related issue, which is now that I know that you have to have kavana, you have to have intent when you're reciting Kriya Shema, what are you allowed to and not allowed to do as far as interruptions in the midst, which could disrupt your kavana? So if you're in between the paragraphs, or you're in between the blessings of Kriya Shema, shoel mipnei hakavod umeishiv. Then if someone of honor, an honorable individual, someone who's worthy of reverence, passes by you, then even though normally you would get up and you would greet that person, you're in the middle of davening. So what do? So here the Mishnah says that if you're in between the paragraphs, then you're allowed to actually interrupt what you're doing as far as davening and go over to the person and say, Shalom Alecha, Shalom Aleichem. You're allowed to greet that person. Umeishiv, and certainly you'd be allowed to respond to that person's greetings. If that person initiated greeting to you, you'd be allowed to say Aleichem Shalom. Uve'emtza, however, if you're in the middle of the paragraph, you've already said V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha b'chol me'odecha, and you're about to say V'hayu, and all of a sudden someone comes over to you and is an important person. So shoel mipnei hayira, you're only allowed to interrupt your Shema if you feel that this person is not only worthy of honor, but is an intimidating person. Meaning, if it's a person that you feel that if I don't show that person respect, he may come after me. And that was a real concern. Jews were very under the gun, literally under the gun, throughout most of our diaspora history. We may be coming under the gun again. Well, this is certainly what it looks like. But you can certainly appreciate that if the governor or the local land baron comes by and he's expecting the Jews to cower before him. And instead of cowering, we're wrapped in our talis and tefillin and just ignoring him while we're davening along. He may get upset with the Jews and impose a new tax or throw the rabbi into prison. Who knows what he's going to do? So therefore, you're allowed to even interrupt in the middle of the paragraph and say, peace upon you, our land baron or our governor or whatever it is, umeshiv, and you're allowed to respond certainly to someone like that. So that's all according to Rebbe Meir. But it sounds like from Rebbe Meir that if you're in the middle of the paragraph and the Rosh Hashiva comes along, it's not someone that you're intimidated by, but it's someone that's worthy of respect. You're not allowed to do anything. And Rebbe Yehuda Omer, be'emtza shoel mipnei hayira, and umeshiv mipnei hakal. So Rebbe Yehuda is a little bit more lenient, and he says that if you're in the middle of Kriya Shema, you're allowed to, and you see an intimidating person, so then you're allowed to interrupt what you're doing to say shalom to him, peace upon you, umeshiv mipnei hakavod, and you're allowed to respond even if a non-intimidating person of honor, like the Rosh Hashiva, is walking past you and he says good morning, you're allowed to respond good morning back. Uva prakim shoel mipnei hakavod umeshiv shalom l'chol adam. And continues Rebbe Yehuda, and he says, if you're in between paragraphs, so then you're allowed to greet someone who's a person of honor, like the Rosh Hashiva. And when it comes to responding to someone's greeting to you, that you can respond to any person, even if that person is neither a person of honor or intimidating. So then you're still allowed to respond to them, because when someone initiates good morning to you, you can't leave them hanging, okay? And therefore, and by the way, how many times has it happened that you've said good Shabbos to someone on the street and you just get totally blown off, right? That's not derech eretz. You even see that there's halachas about this. Even if you're in the middle of davening and someone greets you and says good morning, you have an obligation to respond to them. You could, under certain conditions. So if a person is greeted and he blows the person off and doesn't respond, that's not a halachic Jew. That's a Jew who doesn't abide by halacha. You see that quite explicitly from this Mishnah, that you can even interrupt your davening in order to respond to someone's greeting. So what does that teach you? It shows you. And it says, and according to Rebbe Yehuda, you can respond to any person. And so there are times when I'm walking down the street, and I try to say good morning to everybody, the Jews, the non-Jews, because it's part of what I feel is our mandate to make a Kiddush Hashem, even in Thornhill in our community. And it's interesting. Most times I do get a response because the people recognize, right? But once in a while, strange stuff. Okay.
Rabbi, but, I was going to say, I'm surprised that another type of person wouldn't be put with the person for kavod would be the owning, because we have this in shuls where they're coming around, and they're collecting. So
Yeah.
What point? You wait till you finish the paragraph and then you read them? Because I would think
you
should
should.
be listening.
My opinion.
Yeah.
You should not have anything to do with them until after davening.
Oh.
Yeah, because the people who are collecting tzedakah deserve to be donated to, but they also have to respect, and they're very well aware that they're coming in the middle of davening and they're interrupting people's prayers. So they have to be respectful also, right? We're presumably, when we're talking about people who are coming over to you and greeting you, it's because they're not even aware that you're reciting Kriya Shema. So therefore, you're allowed to interrupt in order to respond to them. But the poor person, it's not like, oh, I'm starving, and if you don't give me this morsel of food now, I'm going to drop dead. There are stories like that in the Gemara where you drop everything and you go run and help them. These people have booked a ticket, flown in from Israel, paid thousands of dollars to get here, and have had a cup of coffee before they walk into the minyan. And they realize that I have a captive audience because they're in the middle of davening. Let me go and disrupt their davening so that they can give me money. Why? Because when it comes to my parnasa, no one's davening is more important than that. That's the attitude, right? But the fact is, that's not correct either. And so in order for us to maintain a policy of decorum for the entire congregation, not just for you, not just for me, we have a policy that shluchei mitzvah cannot come in and disrupt people's davening. They can wait outside. They can patiently wait until davening is over, and then they can go around collecting. But for people to go around collecting and to justify their disruption of our davening because of what we're reading now, that's not accurate. Yeah.
That's actually a segue for what I was going to ask, which I think you mostly answered. Is there, flipping it around, is there obligations for the people, let's say, coming into shul? Like if I'm coming in and I know people are davening there, should I avoid putting them in a position where they have to interrupt? Or should they be understood?
Yes. If you know that someone is in the middle of davening, you should not go over to them and disrupt their davening. Yeah. This happens quite often when people come late to davening and they're already in the middle of the Shema. And it's a guy that you haven't seen in a long time. But you know what? His Kriya Shema is more important than you catching up. So be respectful of the davening. Be respectful of his Kriya Shema and leave him alone until after Shemona Esrei. And then take him outside of the shul. Don't talk. Don't talk in the shul. Right? Yeah. Okay. So let's take a look at our Gemara. Hayakore Batorah. So let's go back to the first topic that we discussed. That if a person was in the middle of Torah study, and all of a sudden he gets to the paragraph of Shema in the midst of the book of Devarim, and if he has kavana, he can be Yotzei Kriya Shema while he's reciting it. So Amar Rebbe Ba says that the fact that the Mishnah says that you have to have kavana, zos omeres she'ein habrachos ma'akvos. So you see from here that if you don't say the blessings of Kriya Shema, you can still be Yotzei the Shema. He says, because if you couldn't be Yotzei Kriya Shema without the brachos, then even if you were up to that paragraph, you wouldn't be able to fulfill the mitzvah of Kriya Shema because you're not in the middle of the brachos. You're just reciting psukim from the Chumash. So it's clear that you can fulfill your mitzvah of daily Kriya Shema even without the brachos. And that's what people do when they wake up late or they're going to go to a minyan. My son woke up late. He went to a Chabad minyan around the corner from where we live. He said, so he was telling us, what time do they start? Oh, they start at 10:30. So I figured if I got there a few minutes late, but wouldn't be so bad. What time did they get a minyan? 11:30. They got a minyan at 11:30. What I said,
Is this Shachrit or Mariv?
This is in the morning. I couldn't understand. Like, what are these guys doing at night? They're farbringing all night. 11:30, you come to shul to start davening. So not only does Kriya Shema, Zman Kriya Shema has already elapsed, but Zman Tefillah has already elapsed.
Yeah.
So I don't even understand how that's sanctionable. But all right, listen, better that they come to shul and hang out at the street corners, right? So, okay, so this is where we'll hold it for today. Eh,
Thanks, Rabbi. It's really interesting material.
Great day. Have a great day,
Have a
guys.
good day. Bye-bye.